Now, tributes are being paid to the Nigerian music icon Fela Kuti, who died 20 years ago this week, aged 58. The Nigerian global star fused soul, funk and traditional rhythms to create the Afrobeat musical genre in the 1970s, which became hugely influential. Fela was also a vocal critic of corruption in Nigeria and used his music to challenge successive military regimes in the country before his death from an AIDS-related illness in 1997. He was also known for his dramatic stage presence and maverick disregard for cultural norms, including his marriage to 27 wives. Well, in a moment, we'll be talking about the life and influence of Fela Kuti, but first, let's listen briefly to some of his Afrobeat music.
And the one that shows human rights. Animal must talk to human beings. Give them human rights. I beg you, make you hear me very well. I beg you, make you hear me.
Legendary Fela Kuti there with his classic Afrobeat hit song, Beast of No Nation. Well, to explore the politics and music of Fela Kuti, I'm joined now in the studio by the African Affairs analyst, John Ofe-Ansah. Thanks very much indeed for coming in, John. Fela Kuti's life, of course, a very political story because it was an extraordinary, he was an extraordinary political character, not in the sense that he stood for any political party. He's more political, I suppose, in the moral sense, isn't he?
Yes, the guy was, as you said in your clip there, he was a maverick, but a maverick in a good way. He tried to stand up against the excesses of the political, ruling class, not only in Nigeria, but elsewhere in Africa.
Absolutely, because of course he was quite relentless in his determination, to oppose abuses of power, and that resonated very strongly, as you said, not just in Nigeria, but in Ghana, where you're from, and across Africa, at a time when dictatorships on the continent were quite common.
Yeah, dictatorship, especially military dictatorships. That's where we had many run-ins with the Nigerian military dictatorship at the time, and even with the Ghanaian military dictatorship as well. We all recall when there were about 1,000 troops invaded his commune, resulting, in the fatal injuries to his old mother, ailing mother, and losing all his master tapes, all his musical instruments. That came after the release of his album Zombie, which used the word that metaphor to ridicule the military at that time.
That really angered
the army, yes.
I think what makes him stand out also is that there aren't too many musicians who have used their art so directly to challenge the powers that be, and have suffered so personally as a result. So he was, in that respect, incredibly brave, wasn't he?
He was brave, and one must, commend him, posthumously for his brave acts in using his music to galvanize, and also to sensitize, the public, to the excesses, to the corruption of the ruling class, of his time.
But I wonder what you think about this, because there's been an argument made about the fact that some suggest he was morally ambivalent. Sort of infatuated with his own self and his own reputation, and was sometimes blind to the dangers he was putting other people in. Did Fela Kuti, in your assessment, fall into that category? No,
look, every artist, it's an egotist. Every artist, every sportsman is an egotist. So much so that they tend to, maybe overlook the dangers that they might fall into. They use their art, their sport, and in Fela's case, his art, right, to galvanize, public opinion, or to sensitize, like I said earlier, to sensitize, the masses to what was going on, in the country. So I wouldn't say that. So I believe he was very much aware. Even after his commune was invaded by 130 soldiers and it culminated in the death, untimely death of his mother, he didn't let up.
Right.
He still went on, to agitate.
Well, if we have time, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But so a sort of grand historical figure then that could operate very prominently on the public stage in a symbolic fashion. But in his personal life, there were bigger issues, weren't there? Because, uncomfortable truths, for instance, about his attitude to women.
Well, some would say he was a misogynist. But hey, this guy was an African. A true Africanist, if I could put it that way. And way back in the day of our great-grandfathers, the men had multiple wives.
Yeah, but he wasn't alive in the day of your great-grandfather.
Well, but he was an Africanist, and he did not coerce the woman to marry him.
Well, there is evidence of him saying things like, in the home, the woman needs to know her place, and I'm quoting him, and to know that a man could, quote, kick her butt. I mean, that is quite uncomfortable, isn't it?
We live in the 21st century. We are in 2017. And I recall the current president of Nigeria making similar remarks about his wife. So what did I say?
So the point you're making is basically that this was
much as I don't condone. I
understand what you mean, but this was a factor of the time.
Exactly.
Because somebody made the argument in support of what you said that if you look back globally to the 60s and 70s sort of rock music culture, I mean, it wasn't particularly woman-friendly, was it?
It wasn't. No, it wasn't. And though I don't condone Fela's stance, I still wouldn't condemn him for his son. Again, I reiterate that President Buhari made similar remarks in the 21st century.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that those are good remarks, does it?
Well, they are not, but you see, that is the African, or that was the African in Fela, that, we know I'm not encouraging or condoning misogynism, right? But back in the day, that was how the African lived.
But let's agree, though, that he was a very contradictory figure, because on the one hand, with his misogynistic tendencies towards women, that was on the one hand, then but he worshipped his mother and her ability to stand forthrightly as a sort of strong political figure. She informed and inspired so much that Fela Kuti did. So even in his attitude to women, he was a deeply contradictory figure, wasn't he?
Yes, that's how contrary, he was. Here was somebody who revered, can we say, worshipped, the ground his mother stood on. And again, see how, but then no woman, none of his 27, that later whittled down to 12 wives. I'm not sure, none of them, I don't recall any of them coming out to complain about his treatment of them. So,
and she was, of course, his mother was thrown from a second-floor window when the army stormed his house. Do you think he felt responsible for her death?
He must have felt responsible. So much so that he took his mother's coffin to Dodan Barracks, where, which was the seat of government in those days, Dodan Barracks, to sort of tell her, look, you are responsible for the death of this woman. Yeah, so I mean, I believe he must have felt responsible, yes.
And after her death, his music seemed to become more sort of meditative, I mean, almost more spiritual. I mean, some have suggested that in some ways he was reaching to the spiritual world for signs of his mother.
Yes, I mean, when, something like such a catastrophe befalls you, any sane thinking person would fall into such a meditative state.
But of course, broadly speaking, I mean, his music obviously laced with angry lyrics most of the time, but always this sort of magnificent transcendental quality to it. I mean, songs like the song that's on the screen now, Beast of No Nation, which were really quite haunting and take you into this trance-like play. Let's just listen to a little bit more of that music.
Human rights. Animal must talk to human beings. Give them human rights. I beg you, make you hear me very well. I beg you, make you hear me very well. human rights now my property. So therefore, you can't dash me my property.
Fela Kuti there, and of course, I think that performance was in Paris actually in 1984, and music, of course, as we said, laced with rather angry lyrics there about human rights and talking to the government. But that was what appealed to the ordinary person on the streets in Africa who felt that there was nobody there to speak on their behalf.
Exactly. I mean, it's a testament, to him, that he was a brilliant musician, a master musician. I still play his music today, up to this day. Right, but he used his craft, his talent, not only to entertain, but to set, like I said, sensitize people. And this particular song, Beast of No Nation, was a riposte to what the then apartheid president of South Africa, well, the president of apartheid South Africa, P.W. Botha, said about ongoing protests in those days, that if those protests continued, those protests will unleash the beasts in the apartheid government. Hence, the title Beast of No Nation.
Right.
And that album had Ronald Reagan, P.W. Botha, and Margaret Thatcher on the cover.
So 20 years after his death, how will you now remember Fela Kuti?
I remember Fela Kuti as one of the most iconic, most talented, musicians Africa has ever produced. In fact, I'll place him in the same bracket as Kwame Nkrumah musically. Fela Kuti as a musician, most iconic musician, most foresighted musician, and Nkrumah, as we all know him to be.
Well, some would say a rather fitting tribute there. John Ofe Ansah, the African Affairs analyst, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.